Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today we're going to read a story from Library of Shadows. From Petty Child. Let's begin. Gray as the rain. Once, many years ago, a young man and a young woman fell in love, as young men and women do. Both from fine coastal families, they spent their days walking along the beach and falling more deeply in love with one another. After a long period of courting and negotiating with their respective families, the two young lovers were to be wed the next summer. Though the young man's business and preparation for his new life as a married man took him away from his love, nothing could come between them as they eagerly counted down the days until their marriage. A few days before the wedding, an urgent business matter forced the young man to leave his soon-to-be bride and travel hundreds of miles away. The young couple was determined that their wedding would not be delayed any longer. Weather be damned. The day before the wedding, the young man was hurrying home to his beloved, trying to outrun the quickly approaching hurricane as it moved up the coast and toward their town of Polly's Island. Desperate to make it home in time, the young man urged his horse to gallop even faster, paying no mind to the torrential rain that was steadily flowing the low country roads. In one fateful moment, his horse's hooves slipped in the mud, throwing both horse and rider to the ground. As the young man's vision dimmed and faded to black, all he could think of was his beautiful bride, who surely waited for him at home. The rising floods began to overtake his unconscious form, extinguishing his already fading signs of life. The young woman had a terrible feeling all day, and her worst fears were confirmed when neither hide nor hair of her beloved was seen on their wedding day. Heartbroken, she stole away to the virtually deserted beach, ignoring the pouring rain and raging surf. The only person, for as far as she could see, was the lone figure of a well-dressed man in the distance. As she sat in the wet sand and cried, the man drew closer and called out her name. Not believing that the voice she heard belonged to her dear fiancé, the woman leapt up and ran to embrace him. The young woman wept with joy as her love stood there in the gray suit he was to be married in, relieved that he had not abandoned her but had merely been delayed by the storm. As she reached out to hug him, her heart sank as her hands passed right through him. She then noticed that he remained dry despite the pouring rain and howling wind, and saw that there were no footprints trailing behind him in the wet sand. Tears streaming down her face, the young woman knew that her beloved had lost his life on his journey back to her. With a sad smile, the young man apologized for worrying his love so, and warned her the approaching storm was no regular hurricane. She and their families must leave the area and head inland. Otherwise, they too would lose their lives to the storm. As he began to fade away, gray soup melting into the dark skies and sheets of rain, the young woman promised that she would flee the coast and make sure both of their families were safe. The young couple expressed their love for one another and said their final goodbyes as the young man faded into the storm and was gone with the wind. Weeping, the young woman rushed home and began urging the families to evacuate and stay with relatives further inland. Some scoffed at her pleas, having lived through many raging storms before, but after seeing the fear and dread in the young woman's eyes, listened and began packing their necessary belongings. They quickly began the journey away from the coast as the rains became heavier and the wind howled louder. A few weeks later, the young woman and her family returned to a devastated Polly's Island. No homes were left without serious damage, if they were left standing at all. Feeling the worst, the family slowly made their way home, weaving their way through the wrecked town and all the rotting, bloated sea creatures and debris that had washed ashore and been stranded by the hurricane. Miraculously, the family's home was not only still standing, but appeared to be untouched by the storm. As she walked around the house and made her way to the beach to see what remained of it, she swore she caught a glimpse of her ghostly fiancé, smiling at her out of the corner of her eye, whispering her thanks to him. She wondered if his warning had somehow protected her family home, not just her family as she walked home. As the island slowly began rebuilding, the remains of the young man and his horse were found a few miles from the church his wedding was supposed to be held at. The grieving young woman laid him and his faithful horse to rest, once again thanking him for the warning that saved her family from the wrath of the storm. As she left his grave, she hoped he was now at peace, knowing that his love was safe and sound. No one knows what happened to the young woman after that, or where exactly the young man was buried. However, locals say that the young man still strolls up and down the beach, keeping watch and warning locals of deadly storms. If you see him, know that the next hurricane will be a bad one, and your life is in danger. However, take heart in the knowledge that you and your horse will be protected from the storm if you heed his warning and evacuate before the hurricane makes landfall. The man in the gray suit has wandered the beaches of Polly's Island for many years and will walk them for many more years to come, doing what he can to keep more lives from being claimed by the vicious storms. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The story in this video was read with the author's permission. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit post. Want to support me? Check the link below where you can leave a tip if you wish, and remember, don't let the shadows get too close.